So I sat around in my living room for at least an hour trying to figure out how I wanted to start this talk. I just kept saying to myself, it's got to be good. It's got to be good. What am I going to say? It's got to be good. I've been waiting to speak tonight for over 4 years, since the first time I went to my first recovery night. Crap, you'd think I'd have something ready by now. But I guess I have never been much of a detail-oriented planner, and gave up on that perfectionism crap years ago. So, I also don't want to just stand up here and talk at you about my 8-year timeline into making a full recovery. Because A, 8 years is a long time to recap, no matter how funny I am. And B, because I think you'll gain more benefit from hearing what my life was like getting over those last few hurdles into full recovery. Now I want the goal of my talk to be quite simple. Full recovery from an eating disorder is possible. No matter who you are, what you do, where you're from, or even the severity of your eating disorder, it is possible. Now just to ease into this a little bit, I'm going to give you a quick background about myself and where I'm from. And I'm going to keep it quick because I like to think it doesn't matter where I'm from, it matters where I'm going. So with that, I'm 25 years old, currently live in Minnetonka. My hometown is a small town about 2 hours north of here called Piers. It's P-I-E-R-Z. I think the population is up to about 1,400 these days. I graduated high school in 2007 with a class of roughly 70. I was in everything from band to theater to National Honor Society, as well as playing basketball and tennis. And basketball was always my thing, but I guess the rest of it made me well-rounded, as I say. If not that, served for some good memories. I have a fabulous identical twin sister, Katie, who's right there. No, I'm not in 2 places at once. That's sweet. And then I also have a fabulous younger sister, Jamie, who's a senior at Mankato State and currently sitting in class right now, which would not be sweet. I have a mom, Denise, and her boyfriend of 5 years, Todd. I have a dad, Rick, and a stepmom, Linda, who've been married 11 years this past August. And I also have a boyfriend of 2.5 years, Adam. And I also have a cat, Bear. He goes by Bear or Bearcat, and I love him. Okay, so now that you know my family, I'm going to start my story from roughly the age of 12. And I'm going to grab a drink of water. I need one. Okay. I grew up in a Catholic home, attending church most Sunday mornings and weekly religion classes. But when I was a kid, I always felt like Catholicism was forced on me. I never understood or knew what a personal relationship with God was, let alone that I needed one. I thought all that was required of me to get to heaven was to memorize some prayers, try not to break the 10 Commandments, and then if I did, to confess. Easy enough, I thought. Then, my parents got divorced. This was the first big trial I had in my life, and it certainly wasn't my memorized prayers that I turned to for support when I began living my life out of a suitcase, as my sisters and I stayed at my mom's Tuesdays and Thursdays, and my dad's on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then we alternated every other weekend. And it definitely wasn't accepting Sunday communion that I thought would help get me through the constant fighting I always seem to find myself in with my new stepmom. Now don't get me wrong, my childhood was fine. Although I didn't grow up in a home that went on yearly spring break trips to beautiful beaches or dine in fancy restaurants or have mani-pedi days with my mom and sisters, I somehow made it work. Our budget was always tight, and for some meals we'd have milk and cereal at my mom's every meal. Again, we made it work. And we also made it work when the environment got to be so hostile and unpredictable at my dad's, and so completely lax at my mom's, it literally felt like we were going from sort of castaways on Survivor, desperate for immunity, to roommates on the Jersey Shore the next. But what it boils down to is that when times were tough for my family, I seemed to assume the role of the tough one. I habitually started to lock up all my emotions instead of turning to my sisters or my family, other family members, or my friends, or God for support about it. I bottled it up, I believe is the term therapists like to use. I took all the pain and unhappiness from my parents' divorce and the grind of living life out of a suitcase and turned it onto my outward appearance. I turned all the rationalities of the divorce and converted them into, well, why can't I afford to dress like that? Why am I not a better athlete? Why does the boy I like have a crush on her and not me? And then I started to have thoughts like, well, maybe if my hair were longer, or if my eyes were green. Oh, I know what it is. This summer, I need to get a really, really good tan. Then Ed, my eating disorder, settled into my mind for the first time and softly said, "No, Kristin, I think what you need to do is lose weight. You're ugly." Oh. But suddenly something finally made sense to me. Over the course of the previous 2 years, I've been trying to figure out why it was I felt so ugly, unwanted, disconnected from everyone. And realistically, it was my first signs of suffering from mild depression. But Ed, he gave me an immediate answer, a quick fix, a do-it-yourself solution to my problem. And at a time in my teenage life where nothing felt right or in control, Ed promised he'd be my co-pilot. I could turn to him when anything would happen. At least he was going to be consistent if no one else was going to be. And lucky for me, it was the mid-2000s, or the start of the years of the infamous fad diets. Everyone from your next-door neighbor to Oprah was endorsing them, and you couldn't even flip through a magazine, you still can't, or flip through the TV channels without hearing someone say, "And this is the magic pill, and I lost this many pounds doing this easy plan." It's everywhere. You could even open your ears for 10 minutes at the mall and you're sure to hear somebody talking about their fat, carbs, or gluten intake, I think is the buzz now. It's everywhere. And when you're an anorexic 14-year-old, too ignorant to know the difference between what's right and what's wrong about society's healthy diet viewpoint, you just start to make your own mind up about what's a good food and what's a bad food. Ed, he told me to just take control of it all. What I ate, when I ate, how I ate, what I drank, how I drank it, when I exercised, how hard I exercised, what I ate after I exercised. You get the idea. Now, you don't have to know me very long to know that I'm an extremely competitive person. I think every ounce of my being is made to compete, which is great for the aspiring professional athlete or the straight-A, Ivy League-bound college student. But obsession with competition and anorexia don't mix so well. Now, another signature characteristic of my chemical makeup is that I'm defiant, to say politically correct. Tell me that I can't do something, and there's a strong possibility I will do it anyways. Ed used to love that about me. So now back to when I was 14, and the food fight really began. Wow, Kristin, I wish I had your willpower. But you used to like meat. You're going to pass right out on that basketball court. And one of my personal favorites came from my mom saying, "Well, don't come crying to me when your hair starts falling out." Then the day I'd been dreading came. My dad, who just so happened to be the head girls varsity basketball coach at my high school, said to me, "Kristin, I'm not going to let you play on my team this year if you don't gain weight." F. Oh, the only card that could be played to make me full, the basketball card. "Fine," my 15-year-old self said. "Fine." So to the annoyance and dissatisfaction of my eating disorder, I began a new warfare. My first glimpse of recovery, even though I didn't even know it. So now flash forward 2 years. I'm 17, heading into my senior year with so much arrogance I'm surprised my head even fit through the door some days. I think I'm good looking, I have lots of energy, and I consider myself the best female athlete in school by far. My days of starving myself are now behind me, and I've used my identical twin sister as a gauge for my weight restoration. No therapist, no dietitian, no psychiatrist for meds, nothing. I had physically beaten anorexia by myself. The emotional piece, like the unhappiness and the feelings of worthlessness, however, were far from gone. And it turns out I really didn't even know how much my life was still so disordered until regular treatment began. But anyway, now I'm 18, leaving Piers to go play college basketball. My dream. Even though it wasn't for Duke like I thought I was when I was in 3rd grade, I was still on my way to playing college ball. Right? Okay. Not only did I think I was going to play, I was convinced I was going to dominate. I envisioned all these honors and awards coming my way for my performance on the basketball court. My twin sister laughing. I was cocky, to say the least. Well, freshman year was what I like to label as horrid. Nothing went my way, and for the most part I had it coming. I repeatedly made stupid decisions, and then wondered why I had such bad luck. I surrounded myself with mostly average achieving people, and wondered why it was I felt so average. I tried to take shortcuts athletically and academically, and then wondered why it was I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go. But mostly, I started to close myself off from my family and from God, and then wondered why it was I always felt so alone. Cue eating disorder relapse. So even though the eating disorder thoughts had never really went away from when I was younger, they had definitely subsided in my first period of recovery. But now, they slowly started to make their way back into my everyday thinking. This time, instead of feeling so out of control about my family life, I felt Ed ramped up about my less than stellar first year of college basketball. I was disappointed, but boy did Ed use that against me. So now, starting my second year of college, 19, I began again with making more stupid decisions, with coincidingly tough consequences. But unlike freshman year when I handled it with doing rebellious things like skipping class and going out partying, this time depression came back into my life. Isolation was all that I wanted. Shut up, everybody. I told myself I had to buckle down to get control back into my life. The pursuit of perfectionism had resumed full force. I began to do very eating disordered things, like abuse diuretics and caffeine, compulsively over-exercise, restricting my diet, as well as pull myself away completely from everybody who was important to me. My obsession with body, weight, and shape began to be intrusive and destructive. Now, this is the easy part of my story to share. What happens the next 2 years gets pretty heavy. Now here's the thing. My story becomes very complicated and intricate with details. And I could be up here for hours telling you how this affected that, and because that happened, then I stuffed that feeling, and blah, blah, blah. But I want to do my best to summarize it because it's recovery night, so I want to get to my full recovery, not give you the entire Da Vinci Code that was my eating disorder. So, like I said a minute ago, Ed came back into my life full swing at the end of my second year of college. I was 20. The summer into fall of 2009 seemed to merge together as every day was dedicated to pleasing Ed. But what sent Ed from just heavy turbulence to a full-on plane crash was when a former mentor and trusted superior abused their position of power over my 20-year-old fragile state of mind. someone I believed would be my advocate to get me through this tough time, actually turned into be the person dumping the gasoline on the fire bed. I'm keeping this brief out of respect, but what happened with this person was completely over the line and wrong on every level. So now, I not only carried with me my eating disorder and the secrecy of my eating disorder, which was a full-time job, but I also had to carry with me the fact that someone I trusted, thought I trusted, was constantly trying to blur their boundaries with me in secrecy. Then add a rigorous 20-credit college class load, 2 other part-time jobs, and playing college basketball, very, very malnourished and severely depressed. This didn't last very long. And in January 2010 is when my college athletic department and athletic trainer stepped in to take over the mess of my situation. Now, I'm a regular at the Minn program. No longer a college student, or even a college athlete, or a functioning human being besides for the required breathing of my lungs and beating of my heart, which was irregular at the time due to malnourishment. I'm sitting in a chair in my new therapist Diane's office, slouched over in it, as I lacked the strength to hold myself up that day. My eyes can't even lock a gaze with hers because my vision's so fuzzy. I can feel my mouth wanting to move to create full sentences, but I just can't. So I stopped trying. Everything is yeah, no, I don't know, I don't care. Did you eat anything yet today, Kristin? No. Did you eat anything yesterday? Yeah. What'd you have? An apple. Would you want to have a snack with me right now? No. Why? I don't know, because I'm not hungry. Did you know that your body's hunger cues are off due to your restriction? So you actually are hungry. Your body's just not telling you anymore. Blank stare. Super productive session. Then came the 6 weeks of hell on earth in the eating disorder unit in Fargo, North Dakota. I hated every second of that prison for eating disorders, but they actually saved my life in more ways than just starting my weight restoration process. Upon discharge of the hospital in Fargo, I was immediately en route to IDP back at the Minn program for 6 more weeks, followed by 12 more weeks of IOP. Then came the years of outpatient appointments with Diane, my dietitian Angela, and my psychiatrist Peter Govar. And that's when the actual recovery journey, I feel, started for me. It was in my attempt to successfully manage my life with my eating disorder that I thought I so desperately needed when I experienced how unbelievable life is without it. And I don't want to make it sound like I woke up every morning for a few weeks straight with a positive, recovery-minded attitude and boom, all my intrusive thoughts and destructive behaviors were gone. No, that's absolutely not how it went. It started with taking a single step. And sometimes it was forward, sometimes it was back, sometimes to the side. And there are times I found myself at a complete stop. But what I realize now is that I always acknowledged where I was in my recovery. I owned it. It's super easy to own your recovery when you're doing well. Yeah, I'm recovering, boom. It's not so easy to own when you're struggling. And it wasn't just myself that would own it. It was Diane, Angela, or my new recovery mentor, Amy Call, that forced me to have those hard conversations that I didn't want to have about Ed. Or sometimes they would just talk at me and I would stare at them because I didn't feel like talking. But I was listening. Quick side note on Amy, she inadvertently fell into the role of my recovery mentor after I took a semester off of school to go to Fargo in the Emily program. I decided that I wanted to transfer schools. So I chose the University of Northwestern St. Paul. I knew they were hiring a new head coach, and I knew of a few of the girls on the team, I was changing my major to journalism, but most importantly, I had fully committed my life to Christ for the first time through the trials of my past year. It seemed like a good fit for what I needed. So I began to set up a few meetings with the new head coach, and it took all of one conversation with Coach for him to hand me his wife's phone number before I left the office that day and say, "You should really talk to her. I think it could help." The rest is history. Okay, so now back to owning my recovery. Like almost anything you work really hard to get, there's a sense of pride that comes when you actually own it. The amount of work that it takes to recover fully from an eating disorder is incomparable to anything else that I've ever had to do. Anyone who's fully recovered will almost certainly tell you the same thing. Yeah, it's hard. It sucks. It hurts. It takes time, work, and dedication, but it can be done. And you can have it. You can own it. Now looking back, there were three major realities that I had to accept before I could completely live without my eating disorder. First is that I had to accept that life isn't fair and is never going to be fair. Second, I had to accept that when life isn't fair to me, it's not always my fault. And I had to find new ways to direct these feelings instead of using ed. But last but not least, I had to accept that in order to fully live without my eating disorder, I had to give all of it, not just some of it, over to God. Breaking each of these down, starting with accepting that life isn't fair and is never going to be fair, seems like a pretty easy realization to make, unless you have an eating disorder. And everything that goes wrong in life gets channeled into eating disordered thoughts and behaviors. I'm talking about something as small as stepping in gum, or burning your finger on your hair straightener, or getting stuck in construction traffic, the worst. Can provoke serious thoughts that question self-worth and in turn give power to a lingering eating disorder. Hence, why recovery is so tough. Because when you're out of the bubble of group treatment meals, daily check-ins, and constantly being surrounded by at least 5 other people that are in your similar situation, and then you're exposed to life's unfairness, the easiest thing to hate on is recovery. Well, it's just not fair, I have to do this recovery thing either. Other people don't have to. It's easy to blame. I know I would do it subconsciously sometimes. Well, if Diane wouldn't have made me go get a dessert to have with lunch, then I wouldn't have gotten caught in the rain. I wouldn't be sitting in class soaking wet. Or if I didn't have to drive all the way over to St. Louis Park to see Angela, I wouldn't have stopped at Rainbow Foods to get a snack, and I wouldn't have reversed my car without looking and backed into somebody and cost me $500. Yes, that actually happened. The excuses go on. Well, why is it even anyone's business anyway? Why can't I just live with my eating disorder as long as it's not that bad? For me, it seemed easier not to recover, to just stay in between. Why wouldn't I want to get out of jail free card forever? But the way I see it now, why would I want to go back into the jail that was my eating disorder? If I already know that life isn't fair, all I can do is accept it, prepare for it. Which is why one of my favorite reminders to myself is, stay ready, then you never have to get ready. Simple truth. Now secondly, I had to quit blaming myself for when things went wrong or when life wasn't fair to me. When I was so ingrained in my eating disorder, I took everything personal. It was instinctive. I'd been internalizing everything since I was 12. And now looking back, I know where the real source of the problem lies. It was the feelings that I hated. Hated talking about my feelings. Talking about my feelings was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with your eyes closed. Just borderline impossible. I know I owe a ton of credit to Diane and Angela for making me tap into my creative side when I was struggling to find words to describe how I was feeling, besides fat, which I was told wasn't a feeling. Sometimes I'd be so pissed at Ange for what my weight range was, or the fact that I thought I was gaining weight every single day, that I would just give her the silent treatment the whole time during our session. And when I'd do that, Angela would hand me a piece of paper and a pen, or give me some markers, or some magazines to cut pictures out, or some paint, tell me to put on paper what I was feeling. Suddenly I went from stone cold Kristin, pissed at the world, to what probably looked like a kindergartner in art class, papers flying, markers rolling, me viciously cutting images out of magazines to put together a collage. It's probably entertaining now that I think about it. For me though, this turned into my therapy outside of therapy. I began doing art and journaling almost daily during the hardest stretch of my recovery. And looking back at some of the art that I did in my eating disorder, it kind of blows my mind, first of all, because it's really good. And second, because it brings me back to the day that I made it. It reminds me of how far I've come since that day. It's crazy where I came from. It's cool though, because I can tell I had so much emotion pouring through me, and I just didn't know how to talk about it. All my pieces are so detailed and use lots of color, which was the exact opposite of me at the time. And as time passed and I got better at talking to actual human beings how I was feeling, I started to do less art and journaling. But still to this day, I do use it as a way of channeling how I'm feeling and just putting it on paper. Okay, so lastly, on my road to recovery, the last reality was that I had to be willing to give my eating disorder over to God. He's the only one that can truly take it from me. Now, this is one specific area that Amy, Coach Call, and Sarah Koss, the athletic trainer at Northwestern, helped me with immensely. As I made my way through my first year at Northwestern, I was miserable. Absolutely miserable. Not only was I greatly struggling with negative body image and my weight range for playing college basketball again, but my depression was elevated. I hated life, to be honest. I hated everything. I was angry all the time. And I would have talks with Amy and Coach and Sarah, and they would try to cheer me up and they would pray for me, but I just couldn't shake it. I remember Amy and I talking one evening after practice about how I was feeling. As usual, I was mad and sad. Amy said to me, "Kristin, you know you just have to give your eating disorder to God, and He'll take care of you." I took a moment, looked at her, and kind of snapped back. "Okay, what does that even mean? You all keep saying that, and I don't even know what it freaking means." And I probably rolled my eyes like that too.
I remember it.
Then Amy said, "If you give the eating disorder over to God and truly want it gone, He's the only one that can give you peace from it." I don't think I said anything after that. I just sat there trying to wrap my brain around what she had just told me. You see, even at that time, I thought I was still going to have to live with at least some of Ed for the rest of my life. No matter how much I hated it, I thought he was never going away. But what was actually holding the eating disorder inside of me was my depression. My unhappiness made me cling to the eating disorder for support. And once Amy finally talked me into going to see my psychiatrist, Dr. Govar, to have my meds changed, another day Amy probably remembers, is when my recovery really started to progress. It was at that point I also learned how important it was for me to take my medication to manage the depression in order to maintain recovery. Now, moving on to the day that changed me forever. It was the day I gave my eating disorder over to God and told Him I didn't want it back. He could keep it. It was April 8th, 2011. I was in my apartment, alone, laying across the love seat in our living room. Had my laptop on my lap, doing some casual Facebook stalking, and my friend Lauren's name came up on my newsfeed. Now Lauren was a friend that I met while I was staying in Fargo. She was 3 years older than me and just a little ball of fire. So funny, so sarcastic, we were instant friends. She had struggled with both anorexia and bulimia, as well as alcoholism throughout her young life. And after living head-to-head with her eating disorder since her teenage years, she told me in Fargo that she really wanted to do it this time. She was sick of being in and out of treatment. While we were there, we both had said we wanted to recover, but I always thought she was way more serious about it than me. Anyways, going back to that day on Facebook, I saw Lauren's name, so I clicked on her profile because it had been a few months since we'd last spoken. To my absolute shock, I began reading the rest in peace messages written on her wall. She had passed away just a few weeks before her 25th birthday. I came to find out that she died peacefully in her sleep. Her body had simply shut down from the wear of her eating disorder. I sat there and stared at her picture. On my computer screen for what felt like an hour in disbelief. Not Lauren, but she was so awesome, so pretty. I thought she wanted to recover. I thought she was doing well. And in that moment, I felt God put his hands on my shoulders and say, Kristin, this doesn't have to be your faith. I can take it from you. You just have to be willing to give it to me. It was surreal. I could feel what I know now as the Holy Spirit working inside of me. I slid off the couch, fingers white-knuckled as I clamped my palms together, knees on the floor, elbows driving into the couch cushion. I began to pray. First I prayed for Lauren. I hoped she was happy in heaven, living without the pain of her earthly trials. I told God that I'd look forward to seeing her again one day, and to tell her that she was the last piece of the puzzle that I needed. Because of her, I wasn't going to give up. Then I prayed for guidance and strength for myself as I told God to take my eating disorder. And I prayed that anytime Satan tried to tempt me with it, for protection against him and his wickedness. I sat there in silence for a few minutes. Now I knew what it meant to give my eating disorder to God. It felt good. Amazing, actually. Now, the days that preceded this spring day in 2011 were far from easy. But you see, my mindset had been changed. God had given me his grace, and I could feel it in my heart. For years I'd been missing this truth. I always believed all the other prepositions like Christ is for me, with me, ahead of me, and I knew I was working beside Christ, under Christ, with Christ, but I never imagined that Christ was in me. The Bible says in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in God, who loved me and gave himself for me. And now, because I knew God was in me 100% of my recovery, I knew I was going to make it. And through work and God, I'm able to stand up here today and tell you that I'm fully recovered. I'm here to tell you the truth that life is possible without Ed, and it's absolutely beautiful. Don't rob yourself of the short time we have on this earth by battling an eating disorder every day. There's so much more to life. God has let me be free from my eating disorder. I'm not sure if there's a better feeling than being free. Seriously, some days I wake up and I feel like I can take on the world. I have so much freedom. It's frightening, actually. Kidding. But I do promise to continue to share my story in the hope that I can help other people find God and be free from their eating disorders as well. And I want to conclude by reading one of my favorite recovery verses that can be found in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 14 through 16. It goes, that is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone. But the things we cannot see will last forever.